Catching up a little bit on the Huawei situation. You probably have read, you may know that Huawei is working on a backup OS. But the thing about it is, well, what's confusing about any kind of backup OS is how would anyone accept it unless it had an active app store, unless it had the availability of the types of apps that people were looking for. So Huawei has this app store that they've been working on, and they have this backup OS, but apparently this backup OS will also have the potential to run Android apps. And the operating system could launch as early as this fall. So similar to what we saw in BlackBerry. You remember that? There was a BlackBerry device which still ran BlackBerry OS but could also load Android apps, a select number of them. That seems like a lifetime ago at this point, but this could be a solution for Huawei to get the best of both worlds here, where they could have their own OS with the protection associated with controlling their own code and not relying on a company like Google. But then, at the same time, you could have the convenience of potentially loading up Android apps. I'm not sure how this would work from a licensing perspective as far as how Google is concerned. But I suppose if you're an independent app manufacturer, developer, and you want access to the second largest smartphone company in terms of shipments, if you want access to their user base, you could then just take your same Android coded app and throw it into the Huawei App Store instead of creating something unique or custom for their app store. That's what BlackBerry was banking on. Didn't go so well for them, as we know. But Huawei at this point, they do have a successful product. They have a compelling product from a hardware perspective. Maybe in their case, this could be okay. Now, they're also stating that in order to improve performance, you could adjust your code a little bit for their custom OS, but it would be similar still to your original Android app. So anyway, that could launch in fall 2019, and I think it's a pretty interesting development in the ongoing Huawei story and where they end up. For the record, I don't think they're going anywhere. I think they're going to figure out a way. They're very big and successful at this point, and as we've mentioned in the past, they kind of are this flagship, this really important brand in China, tons of brand recognition. And I don't think that they're going to evaporate because of what's going on right now. I think that they may just change.
What do you think about the ARM chips with them cutting ties with the Chinese brand?
Yeah. So this is more on the side of the bad news again.
Yeah.
So here I am trying to have an optimistic viewpoint on Huawei, and you got to bring this up. Yeah. So this is kind of predictable though, because this is right in the same wheelhouse as the situation with Intel, Qualcomm, Broadcom, Google, and others. ARM is at the foundation of Huawei's Kirin chipsets. So they make, obviously, micro, tiny processors and chips. Following the news, Huawei reached out to Android Central with the following statement. We value our close relationships with our partners, but recognize the pressure some of them are under as a result of politically motivated decisions. Wow. We are confident this regrettable situation can be resolved, and our priority remains to continue to deliver world-class technology and products to our customers. So just as Google, Intel, Qualcomm, and Broadcom cut ties with the Chinese manufacturer, now you can add ARM to that list. Is it permanent? Is it temporary? Are there these 90-day licenses? It's all so confusing and appears to be political, obviously, not just to me, but also to individuals on the Huawei side. One interesting thing, publicly, Huawei doesn't appear to be blaming the vendors. They're not mad at Google. They're not mad at Intel, Qualcomm, Broadcom, and even in this case, ARM. Their statements seem to be like, we value our partners. This is unfortunate. They're leaning more on a political end of the spectrum as far as where the blame is being placed. So it's an interesting move. The more I read about this, the more I feel like this is a temporary tactic that's going on with this ban. I don't envision it being permanent. And I think Huawei's going to find a way around it, whatever way that happens to be. whether the path forward is Android or something else. It's not going to be easy. And I definitely don't think that'll be the case. But the other thing to keep in mind is that there are other Chinese smartphone companies that are wildly successful that also carry Android. I mean, we've got, of course, Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, that whole conglomerate. Those are out there. They're still properly running Android. You know, the interesting part right now is how transparent should carriers be in places like Canada that carry Huawei products? How transparent should they be to their customers that walk into the store and purchase one of these things today? Right here, we got TELUS, Bell, Rogers. They all carry this device. In the UK, I tweeted this out this morning. EE, which is one of their big carriers, has opted out of Huawei devices. Now, with this kind of, I tweeted it on the Lou Later account, but I may have retweeted it there. You can find it if you're looking for it. Yeah, where is it? There it is. EE, a mobile network in the UK, has stopped its plans to use Huawei phones for its 5G launch. So they're backing out. Should you, as a vendor at this point, if you are a vendor that carries these products, should you be transparent with your customers and say, look, this stuff is going on. We can't state for sure exactly what's going to happen in the future with updates, with security, and things like this. Because for a lot of people, this is a significant investment. And it's got to put them in a really weird place, especially considering the fact that they already have stock. The whole thing is such a mess. It's really messy. I'm sure you already understand that at this point. But I think there will be some version of Huawei as we know it that is going to continue beyond this messiness. I just think it's inevitable. Huawei seeks to reassure Canadian carriers in the face of U.S. trade ban. Yeah, so Huawei's been relatively successful here. I mentioned before, in Canada specifically, a lot of promotion and just anecdotally, the public sentiment. People ask me about it, like, hey, I saw the commercial, or I was in my local store, like, should I pick one of those up? And of course, I have a positive outlook on, I think they make great phones. I think a lot of the ones I've evaluated have been on flagship level. So it's interesting to see the difference in relationship there between Canada and the U.S. And Canada has said that there's no plan to follow the ban at this point in time. So it's, messy. Now, there are alternatives that already exist to the Google Play Store. And they exist for a number of different reasons, but they could possibly be operational in the absence of having access to the App Store and maybe being on the open source version of Android. So here are 5 Google Play Store alternatives for Huawei smartphone owners. You may forget this, but Amazon. Amazon had an app store, has an app store. And the reason for that is because of the Fire products, the Fire tablet and things like that. So I remember goofing around with this back in the day when I first tried those products out. And it's definitely not the Play Store, but it has, you have access to some relatively popular top tier apps in there. So there's one alternative. Next up, APK Mirror. Now this is, of course, you're going to have to install these APKs yourself. And I have no idea how Huawei's going to treat that in the future, if they're going to make that easier for you to do. But APK Mirror, I've installed apps like this. You recall I spoke about putting the Google Pixel camera app on the OnePlus 6T previously. I will pick up that APK. I believe it was hosted on APK Mirror. So that's another spot. There's a site called GetJar, F-Droid, Up to Down. I mean, there's many of these. A lot of people don't know this, especially people on the iOS side that might not be too familiar with Android. It's not, the Play Store is not the be all and end all. There are alternatives. And then Will's bringing up Huawei's own app store there as well. There are other ways to get apps on phones, especially in the Android ecosystem, where you can install APKs, assuming that the manufacturer makes it relatively easy to do so, or you do some work yourself.